This meeting is being recorded.
Great. Well, hi there. My name is Emma and I'm from the Unova Center. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for a discussion on the energetics of fertility with Lauren Blandin, the founder of Fertility Yoga, and Dr. Jill Blakeway, the founder of the Unova Center. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions prior to this discussion. We'll start with those, but if you have questions throughout, definitely feel free to add them in the chat or the Q&A section and I can read them out loud for you. We have a lot to cover tonight, so with that, I'm actually just going to pass this over to Jill and Lauren to get us started.
Well, thank you, Emma, and thank you, Lauren, for being here. I love doing this with a yoga teacher because we do have something in common. We have many things in common, but that we have an understanding and an appreciation for life force. You call it prana, I call it chi. Every ancient culture recognized that we had intelligence running through every cell. And if you think about it, every cell understands who it is and what it should do given a prompt. And that's really what your chi is. It's not some mystical woo thing that is very esoteric and you can never describe. It's really the body, the way your body behaves coherently and intelligently outside of your mind. So all day your body's regulating your thyroid and digesting lunch and moving hormones around and regulating metabolism. And it's doing that without you ever having to think about it, because you have a form of consciousness that we identify as the life force. And of course, every ancient culture then developed a series of exercises, because once you realize you have chi, the next question is, well, how do I deal with all this intelligence? How do I influence it for good health? And so in China, they developed qigong and tai chi, and in India, they developed this tradition of yoga, which is all about letting life force move to create coherence. So it is an absolute joy for me to be here with you, Lauren, and everybody else to talk about the energetics of fertility. And does that kind of sum up what you do a little bit, that you're in the business of letting chi move in a directed way?
Absolutely. And, talking about that life force and that intelligence, I'm always directing my clients to that they don't have to seek outside of themselves, that all of the wisdom, all of the answers are within. We have so much intelligence, and it's a matter of just getting grounded, tapping back into ourselves and allowing that intelligence to be revealed and illuminate.
I think you're right. I think sometimes in fertility, some of the answers lie without, to be honest. And I say that, just over the years watching people, but prompting your body's intelligence is really important, and it's the bit we take for granted. So if you have an extra couple of drinks at dinner, your liver sorts it out as long as you don't do it all the time. If you have a bug bite, you have a histamine reaction, your body's used to, in real time, moderating and coordinating and synchronizing, and anything we can do to prompt that, it helps you to restore good health. And it's particularly true of fertility, because a lot of unexplained infertility is really issues of coordination and synchronization often. And so getting your body to behave like a coherent being, which of course you are, is really, I think, really important. Emma, did you have a question? Oh, carry on, Lauren.
Well, I was just going to say, part of the reason that I was so excited to have this conversation with you is because, a lot of people who are going through fertility treatments in particular are having to go through, it is such a masculine process in the sense, well, and let me just kind of back up a little bit by saying, we have a masculine and feminine energy, and these are not necessarily like literal translations, but we have these energetic fields within us. And when we're going through modalities such as fertility treatments, there's so much doing, there's so much scheduling, and that kind of embodies that masculine energy. And I think the beauty of practices such as yoga, meditation, acupuncture, it allows us to tap into that more feminine, receptive, perceptive quality that I think sometimes gets lost when we are kind of in the thick of it, of going through fertility treatments or even having any kinds of challenges getting pregnant.
I think you make a really good point. We see it in terms of yin and yang, which takes male and female out of it, which I really rather like.
Right.
You know, and everybody is a combination of yin and yang. I'm more yang when I'm running my company, and I'm more yin when I'm in the treatment room with patients, for instance. And pregnancy is a very receptive yin process. And you're right, fertility treatments are very doing, timetable-y, yang, and yet sometimes really necessary treatments. And so doing something yin and receptive and giving your body that message while you're doing this very sort of yang, directed, purposeful thing is, I think, really helpful. And that's where someone like you comes in, of course.
And so all of it is about bringing the body into balance, bringing the body into balance when you're doing, excuse me, these, like you said, these very regimented regimes that you're having to go through when you're going through treatment.
Yes.
So I think that brings us nicely to one of our first questions. Actually, a lot of people sent in questions asking about finding balance, with one person in particular wondering how to create a pleasant and balanced environment both in and around themselves. So I would love to hear both of your thoughts on finding that balance and balancing your mindset and setting realistic expectations at the beginning of your fertility journey as well as throughout.
Do you want to go first with that one, Lauren?
Sure. I think it's key to kind of get curious and start to carve out what it is that you enjoy, whether that be activities, food, your environment, the people that are in your life, you know, getting really clear about who you like to have around, where you like to be, and then bringing more of that into your environment. But I think it's also important to know that balance, it's an ebb and flow. It's not this linear, rigid construct, and that if we're willing to know that, you know, it's more about our response to it and our relationship to it. I think that we are less inclined to be rigid about what it means to be balanced per se, and we allow there to be some flexibility.
Yes, I agree with you, and I think we run very tight. A lot of us, particularly New Yorkers, we run very tight. And the first thing I want to say is that stressed people do get pregnant, because most of my patients get stressed about being stressed. Yeah, they're like, oh my God, I read that stress is bad for fertility, and now I'm stressed, so it's going to be harder. And you can imagine that's a sort of mind loop that is very unhelpful. So I always say this. You know, stress is normal, probably not the level of stress we all now have in our modern world, where everything pings and whistles and needs our attention, and we have notifications at all times. But I'm not sure that's good for us, to be honest. But we're built to handle stress. What we're not built to handle is stress that never relieves. We're built to, you know, meet a challenge and then go back to center. And so one of the things I do a lot of fertility coaching online on Zoom. And we practice recognizing when you run tight, and then finding things that work for you, which can be quite individual, to come back to center. And by that, I mean, some people need to let pressure off the pressure cooker, and going for a run or doing exercise or doing some yoga is the way to do it, some active yoga, yeah? Some people need to quiet their mind, and they need to, you know, do a meditation practice or some very yin yoga or something like that. And so the first lesson I do with people is get them to recognize when they're running tight. And why is that important to fertility? Well, we talked about your energy as being a coherent system of communication. The tighter you run, the harder it is for your body to communicate. So that means that it gets harder and harder to make appropriate hormonal transitions, for instance. And so we see people's cycles get wonky when they have a period of intense stress, or stop altogether. And so I see it in terms of contraction and expansion. Life happens. It's just constantly moving. It's like living in a video game, I think, life. A lot of it we don't like, or, you know, some of it we don't like, some of it we do, which I think is perfectly normal. And as things happen that we don't like, we get tighter and tighter and resistant. So the first thing I do is teach people to say, oh, I got resistant to that movement in my life. I'm going to expand again. And we literally practice on Zoom, like expanding again. I'm going to send them to you for stretching. I think so. You need a way of recognizing when you're out of balance and running really tight, and a way of coming back to center, not because you've solved everything, but because you need a break. Your body needs a break from constant vigilance. And it may be laughing at a funny movie, it may be doing a yoga class, it may be meditation, it may be going for a walk with the dog, but you need something that's your touchstone, that is like, okay, the war is over for a minute, the battle is over, and I'm going to go back to being me.
And I love that you're starting with asking them to recognize whether they're running tight or not, because what you're really doing is you're cultivating a sense of mindfulness within them. So they have to go inside, they have to get out of their thinking brain and get into their body, which is, like I was saying before, really where all of the intelligence, all of the answers is. And then from there, you can start to say, okay, what do I need? What can I bring into my environment to help create a more balanced setting?
And it's a skill, I think, a learned skill, to know when to listen to your mind and when to move away from it. Yes. And many people, actually, I practice this with meditation with my patients, because people are surprised that they can move away from their minds, that there is a will that is bigger than their mind. And obviously your mind's useful for making decisions and logistics and planning and all sorts of things. But as well as I do, people listening at home, and Lauren, that when we get tight, when we get resistant to the movement in life, our mind is no longer helpful. It's a product of that tightness, and it's a thought stream that is full of catastrophizing and worry and fear, that just sort of sets up more stress and tightness. And it becomes a bit of a catch-22. So I practice with patients, when you move away from your mind and when you use it. Our patients at Unova tend to be really smart people. And mostly they can think their way out of anything. Yes. And this fertility journey is the first thing they've hit often, where they can't think harder, work harder, be smarter, put in more effort, and just make it work. And their resistance to that very fact, which I totally identify with, gives rise to a lot of very catastrophic thinking. And I remember one very sweet patient who did eventually get pregnant, who said to me, Jill, I'd be so much calmer going through this if I knew it was all going to be all right in the end. I was like, yes, that's it. It's the living with the unknown. And isn't that just life? Isn't that the thing that we all find scary? That's why people go to see psychics. That's why people try to predict the future. It's because the unknown is scary to us, and some acceptance that we don't know quite how this is going to all work out. I do have to tell you that after 25 years of practice, pretty much everybody ends up with a baby, though. I should tell you that. Not all thanks to me by any means. Sometimes thanks to Western medicine, God, who knows. But it does all tend to work out, which I comfort myself on difficult days when the patients have had difficult days. I have the perspective that you don't, of having watched thousands of women and couples through this journey. And so I have some thoughts about the fact that something will work, even if nothing has before. We just have to find the something.
While we're talking about stress, I feel like your advice might be similar for this question, but I feel like that perspective was more on stress internally a little bit. And there were other people who had also asked about stress and resentment, in particular when you get pregnant and you see people around you getting pregnant. I wondered if you had advice on that type of stress.
So hard. I spend a lot of time holding people's hands through this. This is the stage I'm at with my career. The Unova team did the acupuncture, and I meet with people on Zoom, and this is so hard to deal with. The first advice I give to patients is, do not torture yourself. Yeah, so don't make yourself go to baby showers if it just is breaking your heart. Don't just be mean to you. But the other thing is to recognize even that as a movement that you have resistance to. Yeah, the woman I sit next to at work is pregnant. I'm really resistant to that. And I understand why, but we're not going to get tight. Yeah, or we're going to get tight, but we're going to open back up, is how I see it. And so again, it's recognizing that things happen that we interpret as painful. And we're not necessarily wrong. I think it is painful to be longing for a baby and then see people, who, and you know what I think's really hard is people who are trying so hard and doing everything right, and then it appears like people who live on beer and Cheetos are doing just fine and have 5 children, and it just feels so unfair. Yeah, they're like they've given up ice cream and coffee and alcohol, and they're doing an appropriate amount of exercise, not too much, and they've read all the books and they're taking all the supplements and they're coming for acupuncture, and I think it has some unfairness to it. But it's really just recognizing that you're just resistant and to a movement, and expanding again helps you to get a yeah. You can imagine when you're resistant, it's all no. You're like, no, this isn't working. You just have a big no to everything. And if you can expand a bit, you start to get a yes to life again. And that way lies, I think, some peace of mind during this journey. And I always say to people, we need to find out how to bring you peace of mind, because it can take a little while to get pregnant. Yeah. And so you need a regimen. You need something that you can live with. It's the same with diet, incidentally. You can't do draconian diets for months on end. You'll end up miserable. And so we have to come up with something that's really easy for you, which brings me to ease. Actually, I think trying to find ease in situations, particularly those situations where other people are getting pregnant and it hurts you and you feel resentful, you should find your own ease, which may be that you write a note and say, I'm so happy for you, but don't go to the baby shower or something like that. If that's going to be really hard, be kind to you too. You're going through a lot.
This question reminds me of that Olivia Rodrigo song, Jealousy. And there's a line that she says, their win is not my loss. And
Yes.
So being able on the one hand to recognize that, and then on the other hand, also recognizing for yourself that you are going through a tough time. And yeah. I firmly believe that you have to name it to tame it. So again, acknowledging what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and outing that. You have to feel it to heal it. So you have to take whatever it is that you're feeling and let it move through your body so that it can be released, whether that be crying, hitting your pillow, whatever you need to do, but you have to let those emotions process through your body and so that they can be released. And then also, I'll always say that movement is medicine. We are energy bodies, and this resentment, anger, frustration, it gets stagnated in our body. So we have to move that out. We have to move our bodies so that we can create clarity within our mind. And I think that helps to create the ease that Jill was talking about. It helps to create a little bit of separation and also open up to other possibilities and other opportunities. I was also just reflecting recently something that I was going through, but I was thinking about the chakra system and how the second chakra pertains to birth, rebirth, fertility, renewal, creativity, and sexuality. And I think on the one hand, you can think about this in these very black and white terms of, birth and rebirth. Oh, that must mean a baby. But it also very much means tapping into your own creativity. So if you have a project that you're working on, if you have something that you're gestating and then eventually putting out into the world, how can we reframe some of these conversations and what we're going through? So it's not just this linear black and white perspective, but again, also not bypassing what it is that we're feeling and we're experiencing and we're going through. So having that ebb, having that flow, and being able to live within both realms.
That was such a good answer, Lauren. I learned something by listening to you there. That was really helpful. Yeah, it's true. We do need to embody our feelings. If they're just a mental torture to us, if it's just a mind stream, the answer is to bring it into your body and feel it rather than just think around the edges with your mind, in fact. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Name it to tame it and feel it to heal it.
I love that.
Simple way of putting that, but it's so lovely. Thank you.
It's like she's one of our favorite yoga teachers right there. Yeah.
So some people had submitted questions. I kind of grouped together a bunch of questions because what's nice about community is that we tend to have similar experiences and similar concerns. So many people were wondering about your advice on harnessing your own energetic capabilities and your energy throughout trying to conceive and some people, even if they're going through IVF or IUI cycles, if there's certain things that they can keep in mind to keep themselves more energetically open, perhaps, or if you have any advice on that.
Yes, I do. I teach people to feel their chi. And really what I do is I do guided meditation with people and I get them to, would you like me to do 5 minutes? Would that help? Shall we just experience it? Let's just experience it. So let me help you feel your chi. So if you're watching this at home, just do this along with me, okay? Just close your eyes and take some nice, easy breaths into your abdomen and let your diaphragm move. And imagine that you're creating space with the breath, that as your diaphragm moves, you're relieving tension and creating space. You're breathing all the way down to your abdomen. Your abdomen moves out on the in-breath and in on the out-breath. And then I want you to imagine that you have tree roots coming out of your tailbone and out of the soles of your feet. And just in your imagination, in your mind's eye, see them going into the ground and watch them go deeper and deeper and deeper, and let yourself feel connected to the earth. Feel how much you're influenced by the earth, that you are influenced by the daily rhythm of the sun, the annual movement of the seasons, the monthly changes in the moon, that the earth gives you herbal medicine, food, water, shelter, that you're very much in a reciprocal arrangement with the earth and that you're part of everything on earth, but it's not all of who you are, or you just be a machine. You're not just a physical body. Every cell in your body has life force. So I want you to imagine that life force as a ball of intelligent light above your head and make it a bit dynamic, because this is constantly in real time, in the present, assessing and then recalibrating. It's what your body does all day, is assess the pressures on you and then try to meet them. So just see it as very dynamic and intelligent, and bring that light into your head, in your mind's eye, and then take it down your neck, through your shoulders, moving out any tension, and all the way down your arms to your fingertips. And because hands are made to feel it in your hands. Feel what life feels like. It has a little tingle to it. It has a vibration. Life is movement, and that's why it's constant change. And then take it into your chest and down your abdomen to your pelvic floor, so that your whole torso is now full of this intelligence. And then take it from your hips to your knees to your ankles and into your feet, and just feel yourself as you really are, which is a physical human being deeply connected to the earth that is your home, with a consciousness that is so intelligent and is regulating everything and meeting all the stressors on you. Now, at this point, we can take the light where we need it. And as I don't know where everybody needs their individual lights, I'm just going to imagine that we just put this light on our chest, and we just see our chest fill up with light, intelligence. We're not having to work everything out with our minds, although our minds are useful, because our body is also incredibly smart. So just let yourself feel some expansion in your chest. And then when it feels good, you can gently open your eyes and we'll come back together.
That was excellent.
And that is the beginning of being able to recognize your chi as an integral part of your whole system, is visualizing it as light. And I often get the patients to, put it on their ovaries. Yeah, just see your ovaries as light. And what you're really doing is bringing your attention to the intelligence of an ovary, that every ovarian cell is receptive enough to know, to recognize a very minute hormonal change and react accordingly. And to help that process, I have people visualize it as light, have them feel it, because life has a feeling to it. When you really tune in, it feels a little fizzy, I think, and then direct it. And I have had patients turn around all sorts of hormonal imbalances just by doing that, just by speaking the body's language in some ways.
I think it's also important. So I feel like as we're having this conversation, I'm being like, I feel like I'm on a football field and I have these like light poles on either side. And I'm like throwing the ball because I always come back to the middle path. And so on the one hand, I think that we have to stay open and receptive and harness that energy. And on the other hand, I also think, especially if you are going through fertility treatments or are struggling with pregnancy, you have to protect your energy.
Yeah.
And so I think that in those circumstances, it is incredibly important to find a community of people who are going through a very similar experience that you are, because even the best intending people who love you the most, but who are just not going through this experience, they're not going to understand. They're not going to understand the challenges, the stress, and everything that comes along with this experience. And so I think that finding communities of people who are having a similar experience where you can, I mean, in some ways, you know, you're kind of being ripped open through this process. And in this process, you can also heal, and doing that with other people, I think that's really where the magic is.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Lauren, because we find that at Unova, we have a coaching and support group, a fertility coaching and support group led by one of our very senior practitioners, Anne Brunn, who has worked with me for longer than I think 18 years or something like that. We've worked together for a long time. She's a very good practitioner. And one of the things we've noticed is we keep it to 8 weeks. Or sometimes we even do shorter ones, so that we can just pass on knowledge, but it's part support, part knowledge. But the groups have continued to meet without us on Zoom invariably, because they've found such solace in each other and such support in people who are going through the same thing. And so they often tell us that a year later they're still meeting, and you know, some of them have had their babies by then, and everybody's, you know, been friends because of this. And so I'm interested in creating community. It's why I do these webinars, to be honest. And but if you need support from people who understand you, Anne leads a beautiful group, and she does it very regularly. When's the next one start, Emma? I lose touch with it all.
Yeah, we actually haven't scheduled our next one yet. We're gonna schedule that soon though, so I will be sure to let everyone know.
Yes. And do write to Emma if you'd like to be put on the list for the next one, because she does cap it so that it's supportive. It remains a relatively small group of people, so that everybody gets heard and can hear everybody else. So, but Anne is a source of enormous wisdom too. She'll help you understand all sorts of things. I know she gets a fertility doctor in as well, and a therapist comes to talk, and she gets all sorts of people in. Yeah. Well, good. Thank you, Lauren, for that. Community, really important.
So
and you know, a fertility journey is very isolating. People often don't tell anyone apart from their partner, because they don't want everybody watching them like they're a ticking time bomb. You know, is she pregnant? Kind of thing.
It's true. And not to divert the conversation, but I mean, really the way that I found out about this was just through my own fertility journey. And I didn't tell anybody, you know, I kept it very, very small, and I was feeling very isolated and, you know, just alone. But I will never forget the first day I went into morning monitoring, and that waiting room was full of other women. And it was the first time that I was like, I couldn't believe how many other women were going through this treatment. So and then it made me realize how important it is to have that community.
Yes. I think it's actually important to mention your own fertility journey, because it helps people understand that you understand, that that you get it. So I actually think that's important. And yes, morning monitoring at some of the big New York practices is extraordinary. People talk all the time about how they bump into people they know at NYU or Cornell during morning monitoring because it's so big. And New York's such a big city, and you'd think that was impossible, but no, people regularly bump into people they know. And then they make an agreement never to mention it outside. Yeah, but you're not alone. Unfortunately, you're not alone. But the good news is you have a whole community of people who know exactly what it feels like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have some questions coming in the Q&A section, but before we shift gears, I thought we could just quickly, so I feel like finding community is a really important tool to add to your toolkit. And something that a lot of people had asked about was advice on, important first steps to take before you start your fertility journey or as you're just beginning your fertility journey. So if you had any advice on other tools to put in your toolkit, that would be great.
So when you're just starting, it may not be, you may not think of it as a fertility journey, when you're just starting to think about getting pregnant. So the first thing to know is that possibly in your mind, everybody knows someone who tried for a month and got pregnant, although that is quite rare. So, but I promise you, I bet you all know someone. And so I think you should start by managing some of your own expectations. It usually does take a little while. And we all know someone who got lucky the first month they tried, but that isn't the norm by any means. And then I think very early on, you coming to see someone like us at Unova is helpful because we take a whole look at you. And I think that's important. I always tell my younger staff members that I've solved more people's fertility problems from sorting out their digestion than I could possibly tell you. Yeah, and we're the people who will take notice of the other things and get you in good shape. And the healthier you are, the healthier your pregnancy will be. We assume that, that's a general rule. There are exceptions. And so getting yourself into good shape to be pregnant is a really good idea. And so I would say come in and see us early. You don't have to see us intensely, but let's set you off on a regimen that you can live with. And that includes diet and exercise and healthy habits, and we'll help you drop some of your unhealthy ones. We're not remotely judgy. So we're the people to turn to if you have a habit you're not so proud of. We'll help you, and get your mindset in the right way, and also get yourself some education. I don't want to plug my own book, but I'm going to. When I wrote Making Babies with Dr. David, he's a reproductive endocrinologist, and we really pooled our resources and mind melded to give people the best advice we could on how to get pregnant. And there's a lot to learn that you just haven't thought about before if you're just starting out, like when to have sex, what's the best position to have sex in if you want to conceive, how do you know when you're ovulating, how do you spot a problem in your cycle, etc. And we can answer those questions for you before you see a fertility doctor, and we'll also help you make a decision if we think you need to see a fertility doctor too. So we're not remotely the competition or setting ourselves up in competition, but we're often the first place people come, and we can get people into good shape. And I always say, my first book was called Making Babies, a 3-month program for maximum fertility. And unfortunately, people thought that was like we were guaranteeing everybody would be pregnant within 3 months, which we were not at all. But both Dr. David and I felt that it takes 3 months to change someone's cycle. And so we give people, in my case, I give people herbs and make dietary adjustments, and I'm checking every month and I'm trying to go for a perfect 28-day cycle with a day 14 ovulation, good cervical mucus, fertile cervical mucus at ovulation, a temperature that sustains after ovulation, and no PMS, and a period that is smooth and not painful, and no spotting in between the cycle. So I'm just trying to get reproductively people to look as perfect as possible from a hormonal point of view. And that's a good investment in your time if you're trying to get pregnant.
You said two things that I'm so excited that you brought up, but one of them was nutrition and how important that is. And then also the 3-month cycle and how it takes 3 months so the eggs that you will be harvesting, I keep coming back to fertility treatments because that's who a lot of my clients are. But the eggs that you will be harvesting during that time, it takes 3 months to harvest those. So I think a lot of people think, oh, next month I'm going to start fertility treatments and, I'll clean up my diet then. But it's 3 months prior to that. And I would really recommend staying away from anything extreme, keto diets, cleanses, things like that, because that just disrupts your microbiome, your natural synchronicity. And again, middle path. It's all about the middle path and nourishing yourself with wholesome foods.
Yes, it does. It does take 3 months. The egg that you ovulate has been resourced for 3 months. I have an interesting piece of research. I think we did have a question online about scientific backup for Chinese medicine. So I'm going to talk about a study that was conducted by someone I know, actually, Dr. Lee Hollander. She's a PhD researcher in Chinese medicine. And she did a meta-analysis of 1,300 couples going through IVF. And she split them into 3 different groups: people who did acupuncture just around transfer, which is quite common, people who did no Chinese medicine at all, or people who do what we call whole systems Chinese medicine for 3 months before their IVF. And that latter group, whole systems means everything: supplements, dietary advice, exercise, lifestyle adjustments, herbal medicine, acupuncture, massage, the whole kit and caboodle, all the stuff we offer at Unova. And the people who did 3 months of working on their body had much higher live birth rates. They had higher pregnancy rates, but they had lower miscarriage rates too. And that instinctively makes sense when I tell people that. It's a nice big number to study 1,300 couples. That's why I like that research, because sometimes Chinese medical research is a bit small and you need a decent number to spot a trend. But it's really obvious that people who support their bodies for 3 months before an IVF do better. And it's worth investing your effort in that, I think.
Agreed.
Okay, I'm going to hop over to the Q&A. I also just wanted to highlight, somehow, I don't know how I've done it and I can't undo it, but the chat has been disabled. So I'm really sorry about that. We have some people asking me questions about the fertility group. So I will email everyone with a recap of the whole event and a link to the recording with more information on Lauren and everything, so we can communicate that way afterwards. So the first question we have was wondering about your approach to managing autoimmune conditions and fertility throughout pregnancy, and if that's something that you've come across and have any.
Yes, it's actually very common. And it's part of being a woman, actually. We have different immune systems to men because by necessity, we have to be more immunoflexible because we're accepting an embryo that is partially not our own DNA. And so women have a tendency to be more flexible and also to have more autoimmune diseases because of it. So I think those two things are actually related. That flexibility can sometimes go awry, is what I mean. And this is, autoimmune diseases are very much an issue of what we talked about, your body's intelligence. Your immune system is highly sophisticated and is meant to mount a response to pathogens and the unwanted, but not damage you. And that's a balancing act. And sometimes you have a bit of a souped up immune system that just, goes too far. And so we're talking a lot about balance tonight. It's about getting you back into balance. And the reason it's important when you're trying to get pregnant is there are some autoimmune conditions. They're relatively rare, but they are there, that cause implantation problems or early pregnancy loss because your body's mounting a defense against an embryo that it recognizes as foreign. And so we do a lot of work with autoimmune issues in Chinese medicine. It's right up our alley, as you can imagine, because it's about coherent communication throughout the body. And we handle it with herbs, and we sort of measure progress using sending people back to their doctors to do blood work and things. But it is actually really important to get your immune system into a place of balance and intelligence. Yeah, it takes intelligence to know how much of a response you need to mount. But it's a really good question, and we do a lot of that, to be honest.
I also work with clients who have autoimmune diseases, and I take a similar approach to them as I do with my clients who are going through egg harvesting, going through the IVF process. So fertility yoga incorporates restorative yoga. And if you're not well versed in yoga, restorative yoga takes relatively simple postures and supports them with props, and you hold them for a longer period of time, anywhere between 3 to 10 minutes. And while you're resting there in these positions, you are also focusing on your breathing. And so it's the combination of the physical postures coupled with the breath. It turns on this parasympathetic nervous response. And in turn, you are coming back to homeostasis. You are, turning off that fight or flight response. And hopefully, as you create space in your body, you're also creating that space in your mind and finding some healing from within.
I'm on mute. Thank you. And then we had another question. We actually had two slightly similar questions, so I'll kind of ask them together about acupuncture, how important it is to get acupuncture done every week in preparation for IVF. And then another question about once you do get pregnant, if it's important to continue acupuncture throughout your pregnancy.
It's helpful to do acupuncture every week. It's not necessarily vital for everyone. And so acupuncture, I know we had a question about measuring the physiological effects of acupuncture and whether science could measure them. When people look at the effects of acupuncture, they can use Doppler ultrasound to show that it increases circulation, and they can use thermal imaging to show that it reduces inflammation. It's a much more powerful tool than you may think if you haven't studied it. So it's really worth it. But sometimes it's just, trying to get pregnant and fertility treatment is really expensive, and it's all, not much of it is covered by insurance. So sometimes it can be a real financial hardship, in which case what's important is some regularity. It's like training a puppy doing acupuncture. We're teaching your body a new trick, and it's just putting the puppy back on the mat, until they get it. Yeah. Or I usually describe it like this. When you hear a song for the first time and you like it, but you forget about it, and then you sort of recognize it the next time, and then the third time you sing along, and finally you're singing it to yourself in the car, sort of thing. Well, that's like acupuncture. So we're giving you messages at different points that are prompting your body's own intelligence. And so regularity is really important. So some of my patients come in every other week. Yeah. So ideally we'd see you every week, but regularity is the important thing. So if you did every other week, that would be great. If you did once a month even, that would also help. So that's it. Rhythm. We're trying to establish some rhythm. So we like to have some rhythm with you.
Thank you. We're starting to run out of time, but we definitely have time for a few more questions. So I just wanted to put that out there. I was wondering if both of you could share your perspectives on one of the more frustrating diagnoses in infertility, which is unexplained infertility or unknown cause infertility, and wondering what your thoughts and perspectives are on a diagnosis like that and where to, kind of go from there?
Well, I touched on this actually at the beginning of this webinar when I said that a lot of unexplained infertility is actually issues of poor synchronization and coordination. And you can imagine you have a very limited time when your endometrial lining is receptive for implantation. And so if you ovulate in a way that does, or the egg is slow because your fallopian tube's a little gungy or something like that, you can just be hitting the embryo is hitting your uterine lining 6 hours too late or something like that. So, a lot of what we work on is coordination and that kind of thing. And when it comes to unexplained infertility, I did actually want to make another point, which is that often what's going on, and it is a very frustrating diagnosis, what's actually going on is lots of little things, none of which would render you infertile on their own, but which start to gang up on you. And so usually when I have a case of unexplained infertility, I just identify all the little things that wouldn't necessarily prick up the ears of a fertility doctor because they're not known causes of infertility, but they all start to gang up. And before you know it, if you have a slightly low sperm count over here and an ovulation that's two days late over here and a slightly thin endometrial lining over there, you can see that you start to, none of those things would make it impossible for you to get pregnant, but statistically they're all starting to gang up on you. So I just chip away at it with people. And first things first, we identify what we need to fix, and then we set ourselves goals, the patient and I, and then we work towards meeting those goals. We get good results with unexplained infertility. It's not really unexplained. It's lots of things combined with lots of small things, easy to fix things usually, combined with some issues around synchronization and coordination.
I think for clients who I'm working with who are dealing with that, I think just in general, when people are coming to work with me, we all know where we want this to end, but we also know that we don't have any control over that. And that's one of the most maddening parts of this process. And there are a lot of things that I can do in terms of helping to relax someone's nervous system, helping someone to learn about non-attachment, learning about letting go, learning about softening, and also grieving. And I think, what I want my clients to know is that no matter what your fertility journey is, no matter where you arrive on the other side of it, you can go through this process and not lose yourself. You can remain whole throughout this entire process and not feel as though I said earlier, this process often rips you open, but you can zip it back up and it's okay. And you can move forward and life is still going to be beautiful.
What a beautiful place to sort of reach our conclusion on, Lauren. You are a joy. You are an absolute joy as a soulful, smart, compassionate yoga teacher, and your clients are very lucky to have you.
Thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure.
Because we still have a little bit of time, Lauren, I was actually wondering if you could explain more about fertility yoga and the ways that you can support people through that, because I would love for everyone to know more about you.
Definitely. So as I said earlier, fertility yoga utilizes mind-body techniques to help manage the chronic stress and physiologic changes that are occurring throughout the fertility journey. So when I'm working with clients specifically who are going through the egg freezing process, I really focus on a restorative type yoga practice, but that's not necessarily where someone is on their whole journey. So if you are coming to me before the egg freezing process or after, there are all kinds of different things that we can do to help harness the energy, clear stagnant energy, get you feeling strong, get your mind feeling calm. And there's a lot of work that I do there. I also do private and group mentorship, similar to what you have at Unova, working with women who just want a little bit of extra support. So in terms of fertility yoga, I have a pre-recorded library on my website of classes that people can access for the different stages of their fertility cycle. And then, like I said, if someone is looking for additional support, I work with them in both group and private settings.
What a resource for people. And I think if people have enjoyed this, I would love to do another webinar with you where we dig in a little bit and look at what to do during the period, during the follicular phase, at ovulation, and then during the luteal phase. I'd love to, if people are interested, let Emma know, because it's right up Lauren and I's alley, and we could give you, you know, we could talk about what foods to eat and exercises to do that support the process, as your women are very rhythmic and supports all of your rhythm, which is great.
That sounds amazing. We already have someone in the Q&A saying that they would love that, so I think we should definitely start to plan that.
Oh, let's do that. We'll regather in a few weeks, and let's drill down a little bit, because I think that could be really helpful to people.
I'm going to do one more little shameless plug. So if anyone would like to find me and work with me, you can go to my website at laurenblandinyoga.com.
And Emma is going to follow up with an email. She will connect to that research that I talked to. She's very efficient at this, is Emma. Our marketing department is very good at this. Emma and Jamie Ann, who is sitting, I realize, in the audience here, will follow up, and they'll put links to everything and any sort of research we mentioned or anything like that. So you don't have to remember everything, because we'll follow up tomorrow with information.
Yes.
And a recording of this, so you can play back the bits that are helpful.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your time with us and your wisdom with us. I've loved listening to both of you speak, and I'm excited for the next one. I'm glad this isn't the last one.
No, let's do more. I love Lauren. I think she's a fabulous yoga teacher and a total resource, and it's a joy to introduce her to our community. Get yourself to her website and have a look at all the resources she's created based on her own experience. She's someone who knows what a fertility journey feels like, and I think that's hugely important.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Wonderful.
All right.
Everyone, have a great evening. Until next
Good
time.
evening. Bye, loves.